So as Victoria mentioned, my name is Rachel Milner Gillers, and I help run the Georgetown Baker Negotiation Network. Really pleased to be with this group of innovators. Had the pleasure of working with Kelly a bit along the way, not that she needed too much of it. And I feel like it's very apt to be in this magical room right now, partly because of how it just looks. It's wonderful, but also that we're surrounded by books, and it reminds us that we're in a house of learning. And so I'd like for you, just have a couple questions for you all, and I'd like for you to have that learning mindset, because hopefully, as we just heard, you saw this as not only a way to affect change and do good, but that this was a truly experiential learning process. So I want to start actually with Rebecca, because you said what I'm most proud of is that I've walked away with a finished product. So I'm going to ask you to expand on that while also at the same time to keep it really short. You've all had an opportunity, for the last 10 months to pitch your projects many times over, so I know you can do this elevator speech style. But if you could just tell us a little more, each of you, what did you achieve by doing this? And you can come at it at any angle that feels most comfortable.
Sure. So in the most tangible sense, I have created a set of lessons that teachers can use to teach health insurance literacy as a form of financial literacy. And I have done it with the help of two phenomenal women who are here tonight, Allie and Emma, a teacher and a health insurance literacy expert. And in addition to sort of the very tangible lesson plans, I've also created a set of stakeholders across Virginia and beyond of people who are engaged with the financial literacy world and the health insurance literacy world, and bringing a deeper sense of teaching young adults about health insurance literacy so that they know what health insurance is when they need to go out and get new coverage.
Thank you. Jake?
Yeah, I'll go next. So I created an internship and volunteer staffing position network really based off McCourt Connects for Anacostia High School, but also all throughout Southeast DC, where students will be able to search and apply, find, based on their interests, positions around the school that they can apply for immediately through the interface. So it was part of a strategy for providing tools to decrease high school truancy. There's fantastic evidence that a student who has a job, an internship, will graduate and they will pursue higher education. So it connects them to that pathway that a lot of policy innovators and policy practitioners kind of hope to improve upon. So that's the gist of my project.
Good. And I'm going to tweak it a little bit for the rest of you. What fires you up about your project? When you think about what you did, I know you could probably describe it in any number of ways, but what fires you up when people ask you about what you did? What are you most proud of?
Sure, I can start. I mean, any discussion I've really ever had in terms of policy and problems related to policy, whether it's daily traffic, whether it's social issues, whether it's tax reform, anything, you could follow the chain of frustration down and you constantly end up at the exact same place, which is that we have this system where state legislatures are opportunistically drawing districts in a way that allow them to choose their voters instead of the other way around. And whatever the issue is, I find in any discussion that's what's firing me up. It's every discussion ends at the same place. And the problem is that people have looked at this kind of the wrong way. They either see it as too technical and mathy and wonky and try to avoid it, or they see it as just a fixed part of our system that's constantly a scapegoat when things don't go their way. And so it was really exhilarating to see how you can move beyond just Republicans gain these seats, Democrats gain these seats, but see how gerrymandering is actually delinking the ability of representatives to represent the constituency that they're supposed to supposedly represent. So it's all about the ability of an individual to, have their interests represented and their wills carried out, and that's what fires me up.
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
Can I just add, Christian really hates gerrymandering. He really hates it.
Very true. Yeah, it's my thing.
And also, thank you for geeking out on this on behalf of the rest of us, because it is mathy and wonky. So thank you for bringing it.
Yeah, none of us at McCourt are mathy and wonky, so.
So I like the problem-solving aspect of it. When I was a journalist in Abu Dhabi before I came to DC, and I covered a lot of tech startups in the Middle East, and it was really interesting, sort of seeing how they went through the cycle of product development with an initial idea. One of the most interesting firms I covered was a stock photo image company that was trying to have non-prejudicial or stereotyped images of the Middle East, and how they went from sort of idea to conception to funding to having a product that they were selling to people. I found that process really interesting. So having a kind of tech-oriented solution and going through that process myself a little bit, that was really fun.
My project was this workshop series in Iowa, but it was more than just the series and discussing how we can end political polarization and how we can really engage with each other beyond party lines. It was pretty much like a whole community and what I called like a secret sauce in my presentation a little bit ago of how we can engage in productive political dialogue. So things like having local community leaders being the ones to actually speak on both sides of the issues, finding points of agreement, things like this were all important to finding a way to have this dialogue. What excited me about it is something that I call the other 50%. So us sitting in this room, we probably all-ish have a similar ideology for any given political issue. We're at Georgetown, we're gonna be kind of like-minded. It's really easy for us to forget that there is 50% of the country, 40 if you're not being generous, that thinks the exact opposite of you on any given issue. So to be able to bring these two sides of people and have them engage with each other, the agreement wasn't, or the goal wasn't to come to some sort of consensus or agreement. It was to come to sort of an understanding of where someone else's motivations come from and then use that to slowly move towards compromise.
Thank you. So in a lot of ways, for each of you, the issues that you chose to tackle were moving targets, right? I mean, over the last year, since you signed on to be innovators, perhaps what you initially set out to do or to fix was significantly impacted by current events and the rapidly changing space in each one of the issues that you chose. And so I wondered, how did you handle that, given that no doubt you had to adapt as you went? So I want to start down here.
There was a series of panics that one must learn to deal with. But no, I mean, there's no doubt this is a 12-month-long project, and that it's been said that there's really nothing else like this. And I never came across anything like this for $20,000 given to a first-year grad student to go make a change in a problem they see in their everyday world. So yeah, I mean, the project, I would speak for everyone, and stop me if I'm wrong, but I think our projects all changed significantly. But the support systems we had and just how close all 5 of us came together, it was a very unique ability to rely and bounce ideas off each other. And of course, the staff at the Baker Center were, of course, very generous in helping us in that way, but really just relying on each other in those unique problem areas, and our advisors. The resources are there to handle the significant project that we all undertook.
And I think the blessing and the curse too was that because they were these huge projects, as long as you stayed true to your theme and you didn't get caught up in okay, what the new, whatever happened yesterday isn't gonna be something that all of a sudden fixes this problem. So staying true to the theme, I think, was helpful too.
In my case, what happened yesterday actually ended up being a big deal. So when I had started my project, there weren't 2 Supreme Court cases on partisan gerrymandering. North Carolina hadn't come out and struck down a partisan gerrymander. And so, on the one side, that's great because you have a lot more people working in this space. There's a lot more press behind it. But on the other side, when you have more people working in this space, you realize kind of the limits of your own knowledge. So I had originally went into this kind of with the intention of designing kind of a mathematical way to draw the fairest districts. But the second I spoke with a physicist about how you could use simulated annealing to best manipulate geography and geometry, I was like, nope, I'm not qualified for this. And so I changed it up a little bit after that.
I had coffee with a friend, and she is an expert in health policy, and we were talking about my project. And the more that we talked, the original project I had planned on doing, the more apparent it became to me that that was never happening. And that was like both a really important moment and a really terrifying moment. But then to be able to say, okay, but it's still very early in the year, what can I do? I think the support of this team, the support of our advisors, that all became really important. And I think that also having the Georgetown and the Baker Center name, because when I emailed people saying, hi, I'm Rebecca Gare, I have this idea, do you want to talk to me? When I said, I'm Rebecca Gare from Georgetown University and I have a Baker Innovation Grant, that gave me a lot more credence.
My original idea was Uber for food, or Foodba. But,
Trademark pending.
patent pending, yeah.
Patented. $20,000 well spent.
But that didn't quite happen. But when I kind of found the database and of sort of national social services everywhere, and then also had a look at like what Twilio can do, the texting service that I'm using, I realized that the difference between doing something at a local level and at doing something at a national level was just a few lines of code. And I was like, oh, hey, I could do that. So in a way, it actually became more ambitious as time went on.
Good. So you've mentioned a few things that you learned. What is important for everybody here, whether they're doing it in school or when they leave, and they want to, essentially, each of you had your own startup, right, in some fashion. So what is your advice for people who want to go out and affect change and have to start from scratch? If you could just keep it to kind of one piece of advice.
I'd say don't do it yourself. That was a lesson I learned way too late. I think it's almost kind of an egotistical thing at first where you want to get all the credit for something, and you have this money being thrown at you, and so you're like, I got to prove my worth for this. And there's all these other actors in the space, and you want to kind of show that you're adding value. But once you kind of put that ego aside, you start outsourcing things to Bangladesh, and you start to realize that can be more efficient than you trying to develop these geographic files on your own. It really helps. So that's a tiny example, but partnering and working with people. And not being afraid to cede some credit for things was something I learned way too late.
I hired a Georgetown student, and we were discussing how to kind of turn my idea for a data generating process, a database, like how to collect results and gather data and to measure stuff, into code, and then how it would actually achieve the objective. So that process of talking through with some clever computer science guy, like the kind of experimental design I wanted and the goals I wanted to accomplish, that was actually very satisfying. And also it was cool because you're like, hey, there are some cool people at Georgetown to talk to. Like, the education is doing something. And I felt that sort of, like, talking with this guy confirmed it quite a lot. That was very satisfying.
So no one in the court confirmed that?
He was outside of the court, that is true.
I think my advice would be to be fearless. There were a lot of times where obstacles came up. I had to change course, and just sort of bracing myself and saying, you're going to do this, and pushing forward, and not being afraid of succeeding, not being afraid of failing. That was really critical.
I can't take credit for this quote, but I read that like in any good movie or video game or whatever, when you meet the bad guy, when you meet the obstacle, it means you're moving in the right direction. So that really changed my frame of mind of like, oh, when something comes up that's like a push or a challenge, that's something that you should be working to like see how you can overcome it rather than having that be a deterrent.
Yeah, my bad guy was definitely DC Public Schools. Yeah, they were tough.
Can I get my money back?
No, sorry. No, on a serious note, for like the aspiring practitioners out there looking to go out and work in for lack of a better term, in the field with families, I work with students and their families, coming in with this panacea that's going to solve their problem and not being aware of the particulars around the community was something I had to learn. So just keep that in mind, that developing something in a classroom is great and it's fantastic, and you should get that experience. But actually taking that and practicing it in the field takes a bit of adjusting that you only get by doing it. And that's what makes the Baker Innovation Grant so well and appreciative. But that's my bit of advice, is just keep that open mind when you're working with people out there that they have unique circumstances and needs.
So my overall takeaway from all of you, and just having spent some time with you over the last many months and tonight, is that, one, how striking it is that you were able to do the extraordinary work you did while also being students. So that's one. But the second is, what I've learned from tonight is all of you saying, perhaps as a bit of advice for the new innovators, you don't know everything when you start, and there's a lot to learn. So to that end, actually, we would like Rebecca to kind of help us mark this transition. We celebrate you all and all the good work that you've done and all the good work that is to come from all the new innovators. So Rebecca, if you could just please lead us in that effort. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. As Christian, Kelly, Adam, Jake, and I finish our tenure as innovators, it's time to welcome the next cohort. Caroline, Peter, Megan, Ben, Juan Pablo, you are in for a great year. But before we formally turn the reins over to you, the 2017 cohort has 4 lessons learned we'd like to share. Lesson 1, ET phone home. These are the words of advice that John Baker, you gave us a year ago. On behalf of the 2017 class of innovators, I'd like to thank you, John and Pat Baker. You have given us an incredible opportunity. Your generosity has allowed us to create these impactful projects and to grow ourselves as policy leaders and innovators. John, I kept that advice in mind all year as I went back to my advisor in Victoria for advice and guidance to help me redirect the ship when I got lost. Lesson 2, do it, take the risks. Every step of the way, we each took risks, much like Christian talked about. We reached out to important people to see if they'd return our emails. We asked for advice from faculty who we barely knew, and we got feedback on our ideas. Lesson 3, don't do it alone. Each of us ended up working with community partners, some of us more than one. Many of us found that our projects required expertise and hired people who could make this project even better. Here tonight are 2 people who helped me tremendously, who I mentioned before. Emma Goodacre from Young Invincibles and Ali Bakai from Arlington Public Schools. Thank you both. I wouldn't have been here tonight without you. Here at Georgetown, we benefited from the finest faculty advisors who helped us when we got stuck and made sure we could talk to the right people. Finally, I personally can't tell you how much I relied on my fellow innovators to help me along, to listen to me, push me, or let me practice my pitch. Thanks, team. Lesson 4, you are lucky to work with Jose and Victoria. They are an incredible resource and work hard to help you achieve your goals. Victoria is always there to listen, to offer guidance, to help you figure out your next move. Jose makes things happen, but beware. Don't let Jose order lunch, or you will eat nothing but sandwiches from Weissmiller's. And now it is my privilege to introduce the next innovators, 5 students who I know will have very different but also incredible experiences of their own. I'll ask each student to stand and remain standing as I call your names. Caroline Cragen. Caroline will build and strengthen Community Mediation DC's re-entry mediation program, offering mediation services at the DC jail and throughout the community to ease returning citizens' transition back into society. Peter Newhan. Peter will promote the use of the Earned Income Tax Credit in DC by building an easy-to-access web service so nonprofits can target resources more effectively to those who need them. Ben Mendez. Ben will pilot a citizen election observation effort of the Washington, D.C. 2018 mayoral election that demonstrate the power of collecting representative data about the equality of election administration in D.C. If all goes well, it would serve as a potential model for other electoral jurisdictions in the United States. Megan Reichert. Megan will develop a comprehensive training program of group clinics and one-on-one services to help refugees in Northern Virginia transition to higher skilled jobs after they no longer qualify for assistance from national resettlement agencies. Juan Pablo Delgado. While the first 4 projects were located here in DC, Juan Pablo is testing out an international project. He will build an interactive digital platform to allow LGBTQ persons in Mexico report crimes and discrimination, providing civil society organizations with the needed information to more effectively advocate for human rights. Please join me in a final round of applause for all. Good luck, future innovators, and know that we are here to cheer you on.